Hello and welcome to the course Basics of Experimental Design for Cognitive Psychologists. This is week 2, and before we get into the details of the experimental research design, I will present a brief survey of the descriptive and correlational research designs as well, so that we have a good idea about what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of the experimental research design, and also that we are aware of the considerations in different other research designs, basically to help us decide what kind of research designs will suit our research questions. Today I will talk about descriptive research designs. Let us proceed. Now, we have seen that there can be different kinds of research methodologies. There can be quantitative, qualitative, and the assumptions are different, and the advantages and disadvantages are different. So, let's see, let's dive a little bit deeper and try and understand one of the most important research designs, that is the descriptive research design. Now, naturalistic research designs is a type of research design, or is one of the instances of descriptive research design that are designed to describe and measure the behavior of the people or animals as it occurs in natural settings. So, when you are talking about naturalistic research design, we are basically trying to collect data, gather data as it occurs. If you are interested in studying some kinds of human behavior, if you are interested in studying some kinds of phenomena unfold, the idea in naturalistic research is to not be a party and not manipulate or control for anything, but just let the behavior occur in its most natural form and be able to observe and collect data in that particular method. Now, how would you collect data in such a scenario? So, ways of recording behavior in such a research design could be, for example, that you make recordings as it occurs, or it could already have been recorded by others. Say, for example, you can pull out CCTV footage at a busy intersection and focus at the turning behavior of individuals. Say, for example, do individuals necessarily give an indicator when they are making the right turn, or say, for example, are they speeding up or speeding down when they reach an intersection, and many things like that. So, either you sort of make arrangements to record behavior at an intersection of choice, at with a particular kind of target population in mind, and so on, or you could just go back and see, okay, I want to study the the turning behavior or the traffic behavior of individuals. I will basically pick out data from these different intersections. So, you can choose the intersections and so on. All right. Now, the data that would be obtained from such recordings, for example, would be rather rich, it would be rather complex, and it will need to be organized into meaningful measured variables so that it can be analyzed and interpreted. For example, even let's stick with this traffic example for a bit. Now, there will be different kinds of vehicles. There will be, say, for example, people on foot, people on cycles, people on scooters, mobiles and so on, and people with cars or heavy trucks, for example. You will basically be able to collect data from all of these, and it is possible that the driving behavior, or let us say the turning behavior to be more specific in this case, might depend upon the kind of vehicle the person is riding. It might depend, say, for example, on the time of the day. It might depend on the amount of traffic there is at the time the recording is being done, or the time from which the data is being picked up. So, basically what you will see is that there is a lot of data. It is rich, it is complex, it has all the details. Maybe there are particular intentions, particular times that govern people's traffic behavior and so on. So, if you want to make sense of this data, one of the first things that this researcher will need to do is to basically analyze and categorize this data into measured variables. Remember, we have talked about operational definitions and so on in the previous lectures. So, you will need to create operational definitions, you will need to specify the variables you are interested in, and that should basically govern how you go forward with categorizing, analyzing, and later interpreting this data. These designs, the naturalistic research designs, have been actually extremely popular across a variety of disciplines which have been interested in observing the natural behavior of individuals. For example, these are obviously interesting for psychologists, but also for sociologists, also for people who are studying media, and anthropologists, for example, geologists, say for example animal conservationists and so on. So this particular technique is one of the most widely used techniques, and it is used, has been used across a variety of disciplines. And the data that forms the basis of this naturalistic research method can also be consequently drawn from a variety of different methods. So let's talk a little bit about that. Now, for instance, in some cases these data may be derived from a clinical psychologist's informal observations about his or her patients, or other scientists' more formal observations of the behavior of other animals in the wild. So, for example, when you visit a doctor, when you visit, let's say, a clinical psychologist for that matter, and you are having an interview and the psychologist is asking you a bunch of questions, there are obviously the questions that the psychologist is putting to you, but he is also observing, say for example, various behavioral tics, how comfortable or easy are you on certain topics, how upcoming you are in terms of the kind of answers that you're providing, how detailed, how shallow, your body language, your emotional state, and so on. So all of this basically is also data that the psychologist is using. Similarly, for example, I'm sure you might have come across documentaries from Discovery Channel, National Geographic, Animal Planet. There are so many of these which are available, and basically what they're doing is they put the camera somewhere and they go back and they're basically observing how this natural behavior, how the animals are behaving in their natural habitat without controlling for anything. And later, by the way, whatever you see is basically these observations which have probably occurred over a large amount of time at different places being knit together using a narrative, and that's why when you see, it seems like, oh, it looks like almost scripted animal behavior. All right. Also, for example, if a developmental psychologist is interested in studying children's play behavior or children's behavior with their parents, so they might basically videotape children playing with their parents in a laboratory setting. So in some cases, you can have a relatively controlled setting. You're not interfering with the behavior, but you, say for example, have a room where the parents are there, the children are there, there is a lot of toys, you're observing from the other side of a one-sided mirror, and you're making this whole video recording, and later you will go back to this data, you will organize this data, you will try and analyze according to certain predefined categories, and then interpret basically what the data really says. Now, predominantly the naturalistic research design, as we've already said, it yields rich and complex data. So predominantly these approaches lead to qualitative data. So remember the things we were talking about in the previous lecture. So you have to analyze them, code them, arrange them according to themes and so on. So predominantly it will lead to qualitative data, but some cases you can also code this data in form of quantitative data as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. Also, sometimes naturalistic research is adopted because it is the only feasible approach of gathering data and studying a particular phenomena. For example, researchers may not be able to study the impact of, say for example, earthquakes or flood or cult memberships using experimental designs. So once the earthquake has come and people are behaving in a particular manner, they are trying to save themselves, they are affected by it emotionally as well, there is a lot of stress involved and so on. You cannot really replicate this situation, or you cannot basically make comparisons across situations, across individuals and so on. So these things cannot be studied using experimental research design, and therefore a variety of data can be basically collected when you are following a naturalistic research design. Obviously, in much less exciting situations. For example, when people are affected by calamity or terminal illnesses and so on, naturalistic observations might help in getting a sense of how their behavior is. Also, a particularly important concern with naturalistic research designs is the fact that it highlights the importance of what we call ecological validity. Remember, we were talking about one of the possible drawbacks with experimental research, because everything is so sanitized, everything is so controlled, and you're basically instigating or eliciting certain types of behavior in controlled laboratory settings, it ceases to be the same behavior that you initially wanted to study. You wanted to probably study something like how do people remember information, but in a general classroom setting. But because you wanted to follow the experimental research design, you controlled for X, Y, and Z. But then what happened is that when you were conducting these experiments in the laboratory with very fixed lists, with a timed exposure to particular information and a time pressure in eliciting the responses, you've basically over sanitized, for some, over sanitized the environment, and thereby what you've done is you've reduced the ecological validity. What is ecological validity? It is the extent to which the research conducted in situations similar to the everyday life experiences of participants. So what happens is, when the ecological validity is down, the generalizability and the interpretation and the validity of that behavior to explain phenomena happening in general circumstances basically gets reduced a little bit. Okay. So the idea here, or one of the fundamental ideas of naturalistic research designs, is basically to capture the behavior of people as it would occur in their everyday life, uncorrupted by the influences of the observers or the artificial setting, and say, for example, in some sense the researchers would try to ensure that there is minimal reactivity. The participants are not reacting to the situation or the experimenter, and therefore what happens is that the construct validity and the ecological validity is relatively maximized. It's sort of optimized, if you might want to use that word. Now let's look at some other types of research design. So we've talked about naturalistic research. There is also a similar thing which is referred to as the observational research design, when you're making these observations. A very interesting case is is presented in this book. For example, Roy, this British psychologist in 1959 to 1960 wanted to observe the behavior of workers in a raincoat factory. So what he does is he takes a job in the factory which entailed where these raincoats are being made, and the kind of the nature of the job is basically rather boring. So this job entails repetitive movements, basically punching holes in a plastic sheet to sort of make buttons and so on, and this sort of went on for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Now Roy was not really sure about how the employees, some of whom who had been working there for 10, 20, 15, 10, 15, 20 years, could actually stand the monotony and the and the boring schedule of just taking plastic sheets, punching them. Maybe some others were involved in cutting them and so on. So he thought that this is an extremely boring task, and it might be interesting to study as to how do the participants react to such a boring environment. So in the first few days on the job, Roy did not really notice anything particularly unusual. However, as he carefully observed the activities of the workers and workers or the employees over time, he began to discover that there were ways in which these employees were actually keeping themselves entertained, keeping the energy sort of variable in the work environment. For example, he discovered that these employees had a series of pranks up their sleeve that they played on each other, and in some sense it kept the it kept the environment light, it kept them interested and awake in basically executing these work schedules. For example, there is this individual called Sammy. Every time he goes to the drinking fountain, Ike, another worker, turned off the power on Sammy's machine, and when Sammy returned, he tried to stamp a piece before discovering that the power was turned off, and would basically discover that, oh, the power is not working, and he would be angry because he knew that somebody has sort of done this. So when he acted angrily towards this gentleman Ike, who in turn responded and basically said, oh, I don't know, and he basically shrugged and smirked. So it basically creates a bit of a fun, a banter sort of a movement. Also, in addition to this kind of event, something else also happened several times a day. For example, Roy noted that there were several other games that the workers effectively used to break up the day and keep up the excitement. For example, at 11, Sammy would yell banana time and steal the banana of Ike's lunch pail, which was kept somewhere there on a shelf, and what would happen is later in the morning I could open the window in front of Sammy's machine, and it basically let in the freezing cold air. Sammy would go protest and close the window. Also at the end of the day, for example, Sammy would quit 2 minutes early, just 2 minutes early, to sort of just instigate people around him, drawing fire from the employee boss, who nevertheless anyways realize that this is harmless and it's not really a lot of loss of work, and he basically let this activity occur throughout the day. So you can see there are a bunch of things that these participants, these workers are employing, they are utilizing throughout the day to break the monotonous experience, to break this boring kind of day that they would otherwise have if everybody kept to themselves, did not interact, and sort of behaved in a particular manner. Now, although Roy entered the factory expecting to find only a limited set of mundane observations, he came back with a whole, he discovered a whole world of regular, complicated, and to the employees satisfying activities that broke up the monotony of their everyday work existence. And in that sense, he discovered that okay, there are these reasons, there are these activities that keep up the morale, keep up the excitement of the employees, keep them engaged, and that is how basically they sort of were able to survive in that environment day after day. Now, there is a bit of a caveat here that this represents one of the major advantages of naturalistic research methods, because the data that Roy was able to collect was rich, it was complicated, and it could also lead to several new research ideas. Say for example, if fun activities are not allowed, if the timings are sort of shuffled, what would happen, say for example, if the task did not require a lot of manual effort and it sort of became too automatic and so on. So you can basically on the basis of studying that environment come up with several hypotheses, and then if you want to see, you can choose different settings where one of the variables is slightly different and study okay, how do these people work out their day, and how do they sort of survive throughout their work lives. Now, we can see, however, that as the researcher was working a stamping machine and interacting with the other employees, Roy was a participant in this setting. All right, so he is not outside the setting and observing from outside and basically a bird's eye view. He is actually involved in the setting. Okay, so when a scientist like this, or in this setting, when a scientist takes a job in a factory, let's say joins a religious cult to study the behavior of the other members of the religious cult, or let's say even sometimes checks into a mental institution, he becomes part of the setting itself. Now this may have advantages, may have even disadvantages, because it can probably influence the behavior of the people around. So let's talk a little bit about that going forward. So this is one kind of way in which data is collected. Other times what might happen is that the scientist may just choose to remain strictly an observer of the setting, such as when he or she views the children in a classroom from a corner without playing with them. A lot of times, I don't know if you remember in school, somebody would come for an inspection and they'll basically quietly enter, say sometimes the principal and the vice principals, or the head instructor for a particular course might quietly slip from behind the classroom, and they'll basically study how a particular teacher is teaching, how the kids are interacting, and so on. So in these cases, you see that what is happening is that the researchers or people who are interested in collecting this data are choosing not to become integrated in the setting. They are not becoming part of the setting, but just observing the natural behavior in the setting from a distance. Also, in addition to deciding whether to be a participant, the researcher must also decide whether to let the people know that the observation is occurring. Say for example, if there is an individual, let's say there is a individual who has gone to let's say observe a particular classroom interaction. Okay, so there is a new teacher being hired, and one of the senior teachers basically say, oh, I just want to understand how this new person is teaching and how are the children going to interact with this teacher and so on. Now, in those cases, you will basically see that the senior teacher might tell and inform everybody that okay, a particular kind of observation is occurring. Now, this is basically what is referred to as an acknowledged study or acknowledged observation. in some cases where the data collector or the researchers surreptitiously mingles with the environment, does not tell anyone that they are observing anything, a phenomena or an individual or particular kinds of behavior, then that would be referred to as unacknowledged observations. All right. So, we will talk about these things also as we go ahead in some detail. Now, as the decision about whether to be participant or non-participant, and say for example whether the observation has to be acknowledged or unacknowledged, typically it leads to 4 kinds of observational research designs. We will very quickly go through them in some detail, let us say. Now, this is basically the broad thing. So, unacknowledged participant, we have the Roy's example. He was unacknowledged, he did not tell people that he was observing. Acknowledged participants, there is this we will talk about White's study of street corner society. So, White basically wanted to study a particular kind of a society, and he went there and he told people that, okay, I am observing you and I am making some notes. Unacknowledged observer, recording behaviors of people in a small town. Acknowledged observer, say for example Pomeranz and colleagues study of children's social comparison habits. We will do all of this in detail, and let's see how it goes. Now, first let us talk about the unacknowledged participant. Now, this is the same approach that we saw play out in Roy's example. Now, while it allows for an advantage in observations because you are concealed and you are basically not letting people know that you are observing anything, and in that sense it will still most probably elicit natural uncorrupted behavior. It will the reactivity is minimized, the people are not conscious and they are behaving as they would normally do. Now, this is while it is interesting and it lets people reveal their truth levels and so on, but in cases where the data being collected is about personal information or intimate information and social situation and opinions and attitudes of people, then basically it might create problems for the people being observed, and in that sense be unethical. All right. So, it could be possible that the observer might sometimes find it difficult also to remain objective. So, when a person is participating in the setting and has become part of the setting, they are also affected by whatever is going on. They are also probably affected by the monotony or the excitement of the situation. They are affected by people's behavior, their attitudes, what they are saying, how they are treating each other, and because the person is in the setting, and everything that transpires in the group transpires through this person as well. So, as a result, what might happen is that the person may become too involved in the situation or with the people and find that their opinions and perceptions are getting affected by their point of view. So, the researcher bias might come in. The researcher likes a particular person, does not like a particular person, has a certain opinion about the overall scenario, positive or negative, and that will start affecting how they transcribe and how they later interpret and analyze the data. All right. So, all of this basically makes these designs slightly more difficult to execute, or at least present certain challenges. Now, the other concerns that is raised with this kind of research design is that it poses ethical dilemmas for the researcher, something I was just mentioning. For instance, people being observed may never be told that they were part of a research project, or may find out only much later, and in that sense they might have revealed things that they did not want to put out in the public or make available for analysis and research. See, one of the fundamental aspects about ethics, and we will talk about ethical considerations in research at some point, but one of the fundamental thing is that the data must be taken with some kind of consent. If you are collecting data in a way that the participants being observed are not knowing that, then also the researcher should find a way to debrief the participants at some point. All right. So, basically this kind of a situation where the participant is unacknowledged and the participant does not really let people know that they are making notes, they are observing, and they are sort of creating this data pool. This would be a problem when the observations, say for example, start including personal details, intimate information, also identifying information. Say for example, if Roy were making these observations and one of the employees made a snide comment about the boss or about the workplace, and later this information is identifiable, then that person might lose his or her job. So, in that sense you can see probably the ethical considerations that might come in. Finally, another disadvantage of the design is that the activities of the observer may start influencing the processes and the phenomena being observed. For instance, Roy, if say for example he is going through a day, he is also working on a stamping machine, for example, and Sammy and Ike and others are there. Now, if for example a group discussion erupts, people are talking about something, they are talking about a certain employee or the boss or the overall situation. Now, if he would say nothing and not contribute, it would probably blow up his cover that he is doing something else there, something fishy is there. Or if he says something interesting or something substantive, whatever he has said might shape the discussion, might shape the nature of the group interaction, and that again you can see corrupts the kind of data the person is getting and the person is making record of. So, another possibility is that the researcher becomes what is called the acknowledged participant. So, we are talking about the unacknowledged participant, now we are talking about the acknowledged participant. Okay. Sometimes when the researchers feel that it is unethical or impossible to hide his or her own identity, they may use the acknowledged participant approach. For example, sociologist White used this approach in a sociological study of the street corner society, and what happened was that over a period of year, White got to know these people living around this location, made extensive observations of the neighborhood in this New England town. Now, he did not hide his identity, rather announced freely that he was a scientist and he wanted to just make notes and observe how people live and behave in this kind of a society. Now, sometimes this approach is extremely important, because when the behavior that the researcher wants to observe is difficult to gain access to, say for example, he wants to be party to let's say certain colony meetings or society meetings. If he is not a member of the society, he will not be able to gain access to that. And if he is a member of the society but he does not disclose that he is collecting data, then also that may be unethical and later may carry legal etc. implications, legal and ethical implications. So, also say for example, if you want to record a boardroom conversation, a particular meeting and so on, you will not gain access to if you are not acknowledged, if you are not a participant, and also if you not really acknowledge the real purpose of your presence. Now, the most important problem with this kind of research design, the acknowledged participant, is that of reactivity. The knowledge that a certain observer is recording information actually causes or can cause people to change their actual behavior and cause them to pick and choose their topics or utterances or to avoid the researcher altogether. So, either you will not get any data or you will get mostly acting data. For example, I am sure everybody is familiar with the with the series Big Boss or Big Brother. Now, everybody is aware that there are any number of cameras in the house, and while you will see that the participants quite often try to sneak into places where the cameras are not, but for the most part, because they are so heavily surrounded by the cameras, they are behaving in a in a particular, I would say maybe artificial, maybe not, way that they are at least conscious of that there are cameras and recordings are happening. Now, if this goes on over time, research suggests that once the observer, say for example, has spent enough time with this population of interest, or let us say if the cameras have been are around throughout the day 24/7 for several days, people may sort of get accustomed and normalized with this whole thing. Okay. So, people shall begin to treat such an observer as a real member of the group. They might start having conversations, they might start sharing details with this individual without really caring for whatever this guy is observing or not observing. So, this is probably something that happened with the sociologist W.F. White, as he allowed the people in the observed society to get habituated his friends, habituated to his presence, and started his recordings only afterwards. So, he took care of the fact that the observations are not eliciting reactive sort of behavior. Now, non-participant observers. So, acknowledged and non-acknowledged non-participant observers, let us talk about this. So, sometimes it is possible that a researcher may utilize a non-participant approach when he or she does not want to or cannot be the participant in the kind of group that is being studied. In such cases, what would happen is that the researcher will try to observe the behavior of interest without actively participating in the ongoing action. For example, when children are observed in a classroom, I was talking about this, from behind a one-way mirror, or when clinical psychologists are trying to videotape group therapy session for later analysis. So the individual, the researcher is away, he is not participating in the action, but he's still making notes and keenly observing all the details. An advantage of this kind of an approach is that the researcher can be extremely objective, as he or she is not participating in the situation, is not developing relationships with the people being observed, is not developing opinions, or and is therefore being able to more critically evaluate the phenomena that is unfolding in front of their eyes. These non-participant observers can be either acknowledged or unacknowledged, does not really matter, but we have seen that this has its own pros and cons. So when you are told people that okay, I'm observing from a distance, or you've told people that you've not told people that I will be making these observations. Both, as we've seen, acknowledgement and non-acknowledgement basically have their own outcomes. So I'll stop here. In the next lecture, I'll talk to you about another type of research design. Thank you.